Welcome to World History B, Day 2 for Section 15.6. Trying to change it up a little bit here today for you. Get a little school pride going at the start. Alright, hopefully everybody's doing well out there. I have some results for you from yesterday. I put that first video up, and I also put the first online quiz out there for you. A reminder again on those pop quizzes or online quizzes, you're supposed to have those done by midnight each night. Last night for first hour, out of 26 people, we had 7 that took it, so I'm hoping that that number increases here soon. As far as my shout-outs, I had 4 people that got perfect scores. Caitlin, Lucretia, Shaylin, and Talina. So good job to you guys. If you can get the word out to some of your other classmates, possibly, to just remind them, if you talk to any of the guys in first hour, if you can just remind each other that you guys are supposed to do these, just make sure that they're getting online and checking those out. I'm sending out emails and other things to try to remind people. In third hour, 13 out of the 26 ended up taking the online quiz. And as far as my shout-outs to the perfect score earners, we had Hunter, Ellie, Samantha, Hannah, Logan, Ann, and Jenna all had perfect scores. So good job to you guys. In fifth hour, I had 8 out of 11 that took the online quiz. And again, that goes, shout-outs go to Catherine, McKenna, and Colton. So good job, everybody, on taking the quiz that took it, and especially those that got the perfect scores. Again, I made a couple of changes, too. I got PlanBook up and operational for you guys. So if you want to get on there any day, I'm going to, after I get the video recorded, I'm going to go on and put a link for the video on PlanBook as well. So you can get right onto PlanBook. Remember to sign in to see mine. For my PlanBook, you're going to basically use my email, ddodge@carrollk12.org, and the password is just going to be my last name, all little letters. So simply just just Dodge, actually, just Dodge, all little letters. So you can get on there every day and see PlanBook, what you're supposed to do, and have the link for that day's video. So, a few other things I wanted to point out. Just again, another reminder that the online quiz is supposed to be done by midnight. What I'd like to do is I get up the next morning then and check the scores so I can do my shout outs to tell people how they're doing. So again, it's important that you get those done prior to midnight. Plus, the next day I'm going to go over the answers to the quiz too. So pretty much if you don't have it in prior to me going over the answers to the video, I can't accept it at that point. So right now I want to go over the answers from yesterday's quiz. For 15.5, the first question yesterday once said, the Opium War was significant for Britain because it led to, and then what you might want to do is each day when you take these, just jot your letter answers down of what you answered so you can know. The correct answer for number 1 should have been B, which said increased power and trading rights in China. I'll go to the second question. Question 2, how was the Taiping Rebellion different from the Boxer Uprising? And the correct answer here should have been A, the Taiping Rebellion targeted the Qing dynasty, while the Boxer Uprising targeted foreigners. Question 3, how did reformers seek to change China? And hopefully that the reformer part of that question gave it away, but the correct answer should have been C, they tried to modernize industry, the economy, and government. Question 4. Question 4 was probably the hardest one on here. It was a little tricky. What immediate cause made it easier for Chinese to overthrow the Qing dynasty in 1911? The correct answer was D. The emperor was a 5-year-old boy. Here was the issue. In the book, it said that he was 2, and in this question here, it says that he was 5. The key idea, though, was that he was a young boy. So a young boy was in charge of China, which made them a little bit more vulnerable. They made a movie out of that, too, called The Last Emperor. I've shown it sometimes. It's really long and a little on the boring side, but it showed what it was like to have a boy, a young boy, as the emperor of China. The fifth and final question from yesterday. According to the text, what challenges did the Chinese Republic face after the fall of the Qing dynasty? And the correct answer here should have been C. It was often involved in internal wars or war with foreign invaders. So those were the answers from yesterday. I think going forward too, we're going to do it this way as far as like the online quizzes each day. At some point too this week, I may see if I can try to set up Google Classroom and maybe come up with some other options too. So you're just not doing quizzes, but you can have other things to do as well. But I'm working on that hopefully for later in the week. I did have one pretty big announcement that I wanted to make. With all this extra time on my hands, I've kind of come to a big decision. I've been asked about it over the years, and I've always said no, no chance, no way, no how. But given the way things are right now, I think I'm ready. This will potentially be the last online video. This potentially will be my last day teaching. I have decided that I'm going to run for president. Yep, I'm going to run. I think that there's opportunity out there. Joe Biden doesn't have the Democratic nomination fully wrapped up yet, so I think I still have time to jump in. So I'm going to announce my candidacy later this week. I'm hoping that any of you guys that are out there that are 18 and over will vote for me in November. And just want to say it's been great working with all of you, and I hope that you have good luck in the future, and I hope to see you around sometime. And just remember when it comes November to hopefully vote for me. All right, thanks. I'll talk to you guys later. Bye. April Fools! You had to have known that was April Fools. I'm not running for president. There'd be no way. Not gonna happen. You're stuck with me. So sorry. It is April 1st. I had to do something. If it would have been better if it would have been in class, but had to make do. Let's get into today's topic. Section 15.6 is on Japan, and we're still dealing with imperialism. The book, it starts on page 620. If you want to follow along with me, that's probably your best bet, because if you're just going to watch this and just me talking about it, that may be helpful, but if you're following along with me, it's going to be better. So there's a picture of a guy on the top of 620. If you have your book open, do you see who that is? It says Emperor Mitsuhito. And it says he took the name Meiji, which meant enlightened rule. We're going to get into him today and what he did. He's going to be a pretty big character in this section. If you look in the purple, it talks about 1853. And if I had you in the room right now and I had some candy, I'd be throwing it out there. I would ask you what happened in Japan in 1853. Do you know what happened? Correct answer, the United States of America arrived in Japan. We had some ships that landed there, and there was a certain guy that was on board the ship that was in charge. And I always joke about this guy because you always think of the TV show Friends. One of the characters, one of the actors that was on that show, I think the character was Chandler. The actor's name is Matthew Perry. Well, the guy who discovered Japan for the United States was this Commodore Matthew Perry. So he arrives in Japan on these well-armed ships, and the Japanese had to make a decision for themselves. And in fact, there's even an image of this on the bottom on 621. They had to answer the question, do we let these foreigners in and decide to trade with them, or do we shut ourselves off completely, basically continue to do what we've been doing, isolate ourselves, and do we try to fight back and force these foreigners to just get out of here and leave? Well, if you've been knowing what we've been seeing going on in this chapter and what happened yesterday in China, they knew. They had heard stories of what had happened with the Opium War in China with the British. Remember the whole burning raft thing? The Chinese tried to fight back against the British guns and cannons. They knew they probably weren't going to be able to beat the United States here in this battle. They saw their ships, they saw their weapons. So basically, they let us come in. And then we'll get into some details here in a second. I was going to write out something for you. I was going to put a list down from top down of the order of social structure for Japan. If you have a piece of paper at this point, you may want to write this down because this may come in handy a little bit later. Who was the top person in Japan in the 1600s, all the way up until the 1800s. Do you know? This person was known as the shogun. The shogun. What that person did was the shogun was like in charge of the Japanese military. But in the 1600s, he was the top-ranked, most powerful person in Japan. And then, if we had a piece of in the room for a piece of candy, I would ask you, where was the shogun located? Where was the hometown for this person? Where was the capital at this point? And the correct answer for the shogun's living space was a place called Edo. E-D-O. Edo is going to turn into something in the future. Any guesses? Does anybody know what the current capital of Japan is? That's an easy one. Yeah, it turns into Tokyo. So, the shogun was located in Edo. Who do you think ranked number 2 in the social structure? I'm guessing you probably would normally guess, if I asked you, you would probably think this person would be number 1. The number 2 ranked person in the 16 to 1800s for Japan was the emperor. The emperor. And do you know where the emperor was located? If you did the reading, you probably would. He was located in a city called Kyoto. Kyoto. Third on our list, and you gotta love some of the vocabulary today. They have these like extreme ultimate like warriors. They're best of their best warriors. They were called the daimyo. Daimyo. D-A-I-M-Y-O. The daimyo. Fourth on the list, and I know you've heard of these guys before. Who were your regular warriors? What were they called? Hopefully you said the samurai. The samurai. Fifth on the list, working our way down, we're basically going to be your merchants, your business people, people that sold stuff. And then number 6 on the list are going to be the peasants. Now, so just remember from at this point, things I brought up, there were 6 levels: shogun, emperor, daimyo, samurai, merchants, and peasants. And remember, shogun was located in Edo, and the emperor was located in Kyoto. Now, if you start the section off on 620, they talk about the fact that Japan had been isolated for years. They did the same thing that China had done. They shut themselves off to the world, like 200-some years. It talks about this family that were ruling as the shoguns. There was this Tokugawa family, Tokugawa shoguns. And it says here, they were closed off 250 years, and if you go up to the top of 621, they say that there were some problems going on here at this point for Japan. All of the different groups, for the most part, were upset about something. They were angry, discontented. I shouldn't say all of them. The shogun, obviously, was fine. He had the most power, top person. They were fine. Emperor, you could say, was upset because he had lost some of his prestige, some of his authority, because he was number 2. Number 3, the daimyo. Molly, stop. The daimyo were upset because they had land, but they were kind of short on money at this point. Plus, there was this problem where they were expected to go to the capital every so often, so they had to have residence like in Edo to see the shogun, and they also had to have residence back home in their home areas too, and that could be expensive and costly. Number 4, the samurai, they're going to become upset because they had been the warriors in Japanese history, and now all of a sudden they were moved down the ranking levels here. They're down to number 4, and they're not considered even to be the best warriors anymore. They get the daimyo that are considered to be better fighters than them, and they didn't like this, so they were upset. Merchants were upset because it didn't matter how wealthy they became, they couldn't move any higher than number 5 on the list. So they were angry. And obviously the peasants, they were unhappy because they're at the very bottom. They're the poorest paid, and they also were taxed. And so they didn't like that themselves either. So on 621, they talk about the opening of Japan in red. Just keep in mind that the United States, again, opened up Japan in 1853. In fact, it says Matthew Perry shows up. He's got a letter from the president basically saying that we want to trade with you. You need to let us come in. The Japanese, again, decided to go along with that. They did let us in. They signed a treaty with us. And remember, yesterday we said that the treaty with China with the foreigners was called the Treaty of Nanjing. Today's treaty, the one between us and Japan, was called the Treaty of Kanagawa. The Treaty of Kanagawa. What did it do? It opened up 3 ports for us to trade at. And it also did some other things too. Remember that extraterritoriality where if you commit a crime there, you'd be tried in your home area, your home courts? That was set up. And then some other places are going to come in, other foreign countries are going to come in, and they're going to duplicate what we did. They're going to take advantage of Japan and sign these unequal treaties. So the Japanese were very, very upset. On the top right of 621, it says that some of the discontented groups, the daimyo, the samurai, whatever, they get upset about foreigners coming in and about the things I already said they were complaining about. They go to Edo, where they're actually, no, scrap that. They go to Kyoto. They go to Kyoto. They get the emperor, and basically they get the emperor and they take them with him, or with them, to Edo, and they overthrow the shogun. They overthrow the shogun, and basically they take the emperor and they put the emperor back in charge. So now we have a change here. In 1867, the shogun moves down the list to number 2, and the emperor moves back up to where he had been years before to number 1. And now the emperor will be located in Edo and not in Kyoto. And Edo would really become the full-fledged capital. And it even says in the reading that eventually Edo would be renamed Tokyo, which meant Eastern Capital. So that was all going on. Now, the Meiji Restoration. This is pretty important. The guy who was the emperor at this point was a guy named Mutsuhito. And again, his picture is on the top of 620. He's going to rename himself. He's going to call himself the Meiji. The Meiji. And again, Meiji means the enlightened. And what he's going to do is he's going to take over at the age of 15. He was pretty young. Not as young as that boy emperor from yesterday, but pretty young, 15. He's going to rule for 44 years. And his rule was called the Meiji Restoration. Meiji Restoration. What's so important about it? They started to change Japan. They started to modernize a little bit. They started to kind of copy some of the Western ways. And they did a really, for the most part, a pretty good job of this. I'm flipping the page over to 622. It talks about transformation during the Meiji period. It says they reformed the government, they modernized. It said here basically that they kind of copied the German model for their government, where the emperor would have like a lot of power, autocratic power, but they also had now their version of a parliament. And if you look on there, the vocab, it's in bold. Their parliament, their legislature was going to be called, I've heard it pronounced 2 ways, either Diet or Diet. They're going to have that set up. And again, another thing that changed was that all men, basically at this point, were going to be subject to military service, which is not going to make the samurai happy, because now, again, ordinary men could become almost like, would be fighters, just like the samurai always had been. Rapid industrialization is mentioned on 622. As we work our way down, they built factories. Something a little bit different for Japan. They had these large family-run places, and they were called zaibatsu. Zaibatsu. And I always, if we were in class right now, I would be talking about how a lot of these like Asian company names you've heard of before, like Yamaha and Mitsubishi. A lot of these things that were set up over there, though, were very powerful, and I don't know if they'd be completely allowed here in certain instances because of like anti-monopoly laws and things. And one other interesting thing about Japan is that over the years they have really stressed the idea of working together, and they don't stress competition as much. They don't necessarily want to knock each other out of business. They want to kind of like coexist and be like mutually successful. So that's a little bit different for Japan. Social changes. It talked about everyone was supposed to be equal. It said women had a few more opportunities, but at the same time it also says that women were considered to be secondary to men. And then it says by the later 1800s, some rights got taken away from women. They were not allowed. They had not been allowed to vote. That was still there in place, and it said they were legally lumped together with like children, with minors. Women were. On at 623, amazing success. Japan modernized quickly, very, very quickly, And they say that one of the reasons they were allowed or able to do this was because they had a homogeneous society. Do you know what that means? It pretty much means that they shared a common culture, that they all were kind of like alike. They spoke the same language, they shared a lot of the same features. It was easy for them to kind of get an idea and go with it because everyone was very alike. So that was an advantage for them. It also says that once they modernized by the late 1800s, they went back and some of those treaties they had signed, they reworked those treaties with the people they signed them with. So, for instance, that Treaty of Kanagawa that they signed with us, they went back and they redid it because now they weren't as weak as what they had once been before. Japan builds an empire on 623. They decide that now that they are modernized and they're stronger, they want to start going out and taking some things over like the West had been doing. And so they're going to. If you look on the top right of 623, this was mentioned yesterday, the Sino-Japanese War. It was China versus Japan, and we already said from yesterday who won that? Japan did. Japan did. Also, it said they gained they gained ports in China, and they also won the island of Taiwan at that point. It said 10 years later, in 1904, they're going to fight the Russo-Japanese War. That was Russia versus Japan. And do you know who won that one? Japan. Japan. And in 1905, they signed the peace treaty. This would be a trivia question that I would do in class right now if we were there. Who mediated that peace conference? It was a U.S. president. I have the little figurine on my desk. If I had it right now, I'd be showing it to you and stuff. It was none other than Teddy Roosevelt, and he won a Nobel Peace Prize for doing that too. Japan won, and in history, this was the first time that an Asian country had defeated a European country in modern battle. So this was kind of like a shocker to the world, and all of a sudden it was like Japan was going to be the one to actually have your eyes out for. They're going to win access to Korea after that, and also parts of Manchuria and like northeast China. Now, with Korea, once Japan beats Russia and they get Korea, they decide to start going in there. And it talks about Korea on the bottom of 623, on the top of 624. Korea had been a tributary state to China. They had been isolated for, again, hundreds of years. And now all of a sudden the Japanese come in. I think at first they were kind of like, they thought this could be a good thing. Like fellow Asians coming in and taking over, this would be better than Westerners coming in. Unfortunately for the Koreans, when the Japanese got in there, they ruled pretty harshly. They took away a lot of their rights. They went through, it was pretty brutal. They killed a lot of people. It said that the Koreans led a nonviolent peace protest on March 1st of 1919, but the Japanese military basically went in and crushed that rebellion. There's a couple of pictures on 624. On the top left, there's some Japanese soldiers marching over this guy, and it looks like he's a Korean individual. And then in the background, there's another guy standing there, and the question is, who else had imperialist ambitions in Korea according to that cartoon? And the correct answer there should have been the guy in the background is supposed to represent Russia. But remember, again, the Russo-Japanese War, Japan wins, and they get Korea. They got another image on 624 as well of the Russo-Japanese War when the Japanese won. If you look over on 625, the last picture they have there, it's a sculpture, and it basically just shows the Koreans kind of like trying to protest against the Japanese rule. A couple other things, if we would have been in class today, instead of me doing this on this video, we would have done a bell ringer, and on the bell ringer, I would have shown you this image of people playing baseball in Japan, and the question was going to be twofold. One was going to ask, from the picture, what could you tell was like American style? And remember, baseball started here, and the things you could have answered if you would have seen the picture was that the game itself, the equipment, some of the outfits that the players were wearing, some of the flags that were hanging, like the pennants and stuff from baseball, you could say that was American. Then they asked the second question would have been, what was Japanese in style? And basically some of the fans had, like, the women were wearing like those komodos. They were holding on to like little fans that sometimes the Japanese use. Some of the architecture in the picture looked Japanese. where they were playing. In Japan, it is so clustered together. There's so many people and not a lot of land that they pretty much have to find spaces available to them to do things. They got to pretty much find any open area they can to play baseball. So that's shown in that picture too. I always bring up this movie. It was called Mr. Baseball. I don't know if any of you out there have seen that yet. I think it came out like either in the late 80s or early 90s, possibly. Tom Selleck was the main character and main star in that movie. He used to play Magnum PI back in the day on TV. He's an American baseball player, and he plays for the Los Angeles Dodgers. His coach calls him in one day and basically says, I'm sorry to tell you, you've been traded. And he's like, to who? And he's like, to the Giants. And he's like, ooh, that sounds good. San Francisco Giants, they're a good team. I'm fine with that. Not those Giants. And he's like, what do you mean? He was traded to this Japanese team. He was not happy about it, but he gets over there, and then it's just funny to see the differences in culture. First of all, Tom Selleck is a pretty tall guy, and I'm not going to stereotype the Japanese, but like a lot of the Japanese traditionally are somewhat short. He's over there, and he just like is towering over everybody. And then just the way they played the game is different than how we play it. In American baseball, have you ever seen like an American hitter, like in a baseball game, like crush a home run, hit it like upper deck? They may watch it and then like throw the bat and then do this slow jog around the bases. Like, hey, just look and see what I just did. In Japan, it's like different. If a player hits a home run, it's just like, boom, hits the shot, runs around the bases super fast, back into the dugout, sit down. Very much a different style to the game, and for the players and their attitudes and stuff even too. So I like that movie quite a bit. One other thing I was going to mention too, another good movie about what this section was about was a movie called The Last Samurai with Tom Cruise. I don't know, I'm guessing more people out there have seen that one that may have seen Mr. Baseball, but that movie, if you've never seen it, is excellent. And what happened in that movie, I'm just going to give you the premise of it. The Japanese government decides they want to modernize, just like we talked about in this section. They wanted to modernize. They saw what the West was doing, and they wanted to do it themselves. Well, the samurai were very unhappy because, again, their culture was like tradition. They didn't want to modernize. And so what they do is they do a rebellion against the modern government. So it's like a civil war going on, in Japan. The samurai versus the modern government. Well, the modern government hires Americans to come over, basically, and to train